The funny thing about being underestimated is that eventually the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The lunch crowd filled the employee cafeteria of Mitchell Properties with noise, laughter, and the clatter of silverware against plastic trays. Conversations bounced between tables while television screens played financial news no one was really watching. Near the back of the room, a group of office employees leaned together, speaking just loudly enough for others to hear. "There he is," one man said with a grin. "The divorced maintenance guy." Another laughed. "Imagine being 40 years old and still fixing broken air conditioners for a living." "At least he has a title," a woman joked. "Chief Executive of Bad Life Decisions." More laughter followed. Some people looked uncomfortable. Most simply joined in. Daniel Hayes heard every word. He always did. Yet he never reacted. He carried his lunch tray to the same corner table he used every afternoon and sat alone. His work shirt was clean but worn. His hands showed years of honest labor. He quietly opened a container of homemade pasta he had prepared the night before after helping his daughter finish a science project. Around him, the jokes continued. Daniel simply ate his lunch. The strange thing was that his silence seemed to bother people more than any response ever could. On the top floor of the building, Lauren Mitchell stepped out of a meeting that had lasted nearly 3 hours. Investors wanted answers. Executives wanted approval. Attorneys wanted signatures. By the time she entered the executive elevator, she felt exhausted. The elevator stopped unexpectedly on the cafeteria level. As the doors opened, fragments of conversation drifted inside. "His wife left him, right?" someone asked. "That is what I heard. Honestly, I feel bad for the kid." More laughter followed. Lauren stepped into the cafeteria and immediately noticed the source of the discussion. A man sat alone near the window. He did not appear angry. He did not appear embarrassed. He simply looked tired. Not weak. Not defeated. Just tired. Lauren watched as another employee walked by and accidentally dropped a folder full of papers. Before anyone else reacted, Daniel stood. He gathered every page from the floor and handed them back without saying much more than, "Here you go." Then he returned to his table. No speech. No complaint. No attempt to impress anyone. Something about that bothered Lauren. Not Daniel. The people around him. She looked across the room. Most of them had no idea she was standing there. They continued making assumptions about a man whose story they clearly did not know. Daniel finished his lunch, cleaned his table, and carried his tray away. As he passed through the cafeteria, nobody stopped him. Nobody thanked him for keeping the building running. Nobody acknowledged the quiet responsibility he carried every day. Yet Lauren found herself watching him leave. There was something unusual about a person who could absorb that much disrespect without becoming bitter. The cafeteria slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed. Laughter continued. But Lauren remained standing beside the elevator, staring toward the hallway where Daniel had disappeared. For reasons she could not explain, she had the strange feeling that everyone in that room had completely misjudged the most important man in the building. The next afternoon, Lauren Mitchell found herself doing something she almost never did. She left her executive office without a meeting scheduled and walked through the building with no destination in mind. At least that was what she told herself. The truth was simpler. She was looking for Daniel Hayes. The realization irritated her. She managed a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Her calendar was planned weeks in advance. Yet somehow she kept thinking about a maintenance manager who barely spoke. The building hummed with its usual rhythm. Phones rang. Elevators opened and closed. Employees hurried between departments carrying laptops and coffee cups. Lauren moved quietly through the corridors until she noticed an open mechanical room near the west wing. Daniel was inside. He stood on a ladder replacing a faulty lighting control unit. A young employee waited nearby looking nervous. "I am sorry," the employee said. "This whole floor has been dealing with this problem for days." Daniel tightened a connection and climbed down. "Not your fault. I should have reported it sooner." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then report the next one sooner." The employee laughed with relief. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet when the young man walked away, he looked lighter than before. Lauren remained hidden around the corner for a moment. She had spent years studying leadership, books, seminars, consultants. Yet Daniel had accomplished something many executives never learned. He made people feel respected. Later that evening, as the sun began setting beyond the city skyline, Daniel left the building carrying a worn backpack. Lauren happened to be exiting through the main lobby at the same time. Before she could stop herself, she followed him outside. Across the street, a small silver sedan sat parked beneath a row of maple trees. Daniel opened the passenger door. A little girl with dark blonde hair looked up from a book and smiled instantly. "Dad." The word carried pure happiness. Daniel's entire expression changed. The tiredness disappeared. The quiet reserve disappeared. He became someone else. Someone warmer. He leaned into the car and listened as the girl excitedly described her day. Lauren watched from a distance. "And then my teacher picked my volcano project for the science fair," the girl said. "That is amazing. I knew you would say that." "Because I always do." The girl grinned. Daniel handed her a paper bag. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, and one cookie. "Only one." "Nice try." She laughed. Lauren found herself smiling too. For the next few minutes, father and daughter talked about ordinary things. Homework, school, dinner plans. Nothing remarkable. Yet somehow it felt more genuine than most conversations Lauren experienced in a week. She remained standing beside her car long after they drove away. The city lights slowly illuminated the streets around her. Somewhere above, her office windows reflected against the darkening sky. For years people had admired her success. They admired her title, her company, her achievements. But as she thought about the little girl waiting patiently in that car and the father who treated her like the most important person in the world, Lauren experienced an unfamiliar feeling. It was not admiration. It was envy. And for the first time, she began wondering if the man everyone mocked might actually possess something most of them would never understand. The following week brought an unexpected problem to Mitchell Properties. A severe electrical failure knocked out climate control systems across 3 connected office towers during one of the busiest business periods of the year. Phones rang nonstop. Tenants complained. Department heads demanded updates. Executives crowded conference rooms searching for answers. Lauren spent most of Tuesday moving from one emergency meeting to another while frustration spread through the building like a storm cloud. By noon, several consultants had already presented expensive solutions. None of them worked. One proposed replacing an entire control network. Another blamed aging infrastructure. A third recommended temporary closures that would cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Then someone quietly said, "Daniel is downstairs." The room fell silent for a moment. Brandon Pierce, the company's ambitious executive vice president, rolled his eyes. "The maintenance manager?" Several people nodded. "He is checking the system now." Brandon scoffed. "Wonderful. Maybe he can fix a multi-million-dollar problem with a wrench and positive thinking." A few people laughed. Lauren did not. 40 minutes later, Daniel emerged from a service corridor carrying a tablet and a flashlight. He looked exactly the same as always. Calm, focused, unhurried. While executives argued, he simply walked into the mechanical control room and started working. Lauren eventually followed. Through a glass partition, she watched him review system diagrams. He moved methodically from screen to screen, tracing connections others had overlooked. One technician stood nearby taking notes. "This sensor failed first," Daniel said. "Then the backup system responded incorrectly." "How do you know?" the technician asked. Daniel pointed to a series of timestamps. "Because machines leave. Footprints." The technician blinked. "I never noticed that. Most people look for the loudest problem." Daniel continued studying the data. "The real problem is usually quieter." The words lingered in Lauren's mind. 2 hours later, Daniel entered the executive conference room. Several department heads sat around the table. Brandon appeared impatient. "Please tell me this is not another theory." Daniel connected his tablet to the display screen. "It is not." He showed a single faulty control sequence buried inside thousands of lines of operating data. One overlooked error had triggered a chain reaction throughout the entire system. The repair would take less than an hour. The room became very quiet. "That is it?" someone asked. Daniel nodded. "That is it." Brandon looked irritated. "You are telling us our consultants missed something this simple?" Daniel considered the question. "I am telling you the system told us exactly what was wrong. No arrogance. No victory. Just facts." By late afternoon, the buildings were operating normally again. Tenants stopped complaining. Employees returned to work. The crisis ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Yet something else changed that day. Lauren noticed how everyone reacted afterward. Some executives took credit. Others praised the consultants. Daniel accepted none of it. He simply returned to replacing ceiling panels and checking maintenance schedules, as if solving a problem that saved the company a fortune was nothing special. Standing near her office window that evening, Lauren watched him cross the parking lot toward his truck. The city glowed beneath the setting sun. For the first time, she understood something the rest of the building still could not see. Daniel Hayes was not invisible because he lacked value. He was invisible because he never demanded attention, and somehow that made him impossible to forget. Friday evening arrived with a steady rain tapping against the glass walls of Mitchell Properties. Most employees had already gone home. The parking garage was nearly empty. The endless noise of the workweek had finally faded into a rare kind of quiet. Lauren remained in her office reviewing reports she could no longer focus on. Numbers blurred together. Emails remained unanswered. For reasons she did not fully understand, her thoughts kept drifting toward Daniel Hayes. Finally, she closed her laptop and headed toward the elevator. As the doors opened onto the lobby level, she noticed a light still glowing in one of the conference rooms overlooking the city. Curious, she walked closer. Daniel sat alone at the far end of the room. A maintenance checklist rested beside him, but he was not reading it. He was staring through the rain-speckled windows at the city lights beyond. For a moment, Lauren considered leaving. Instead, she stepped inside. "You are still here." Daniel looked up and offered a small smile. "So are you." Lauren laughed softly. "Fair point." She sat across from him. For several seconds, neither spoke. The silence should have felt awkward. Somehow it did not. Outside, headlights moved through the rain below like streams of gold. The city seemed distant, slower, almost peaceful. "Do you ever get tired of fixing other people's problems?" Lauren finally asked. Daniel leaned back slightly. "Sometimes." "Then why keep doing it?" He considered the question. "Because most problems are attached to people." Lauren watched him carefully. "That sounds like something a therapist would say." "I charge less." She laughed again. The sound echoed gently through the empty room. It felt unfamiliar, genuine. Daniel glanced toward the window. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you ever get tired of carrying everyone else's expectations?" The question caught her off guard. Most people asked about profits, growth, expansion. Nobody ever asked that. Lauren looked down at her hands. Every day. The answer escaped before she could stop it. Rain continued sliding down the glass. Somewhere far below, a siren echoed briefly through the streets before fading away. "People think success solves loneliness," Lauren said quietly. "It does not." Daniel nodded. He did not offer advice. He did not tell her she was wrong. He simply listened. The simple act felt strangely comforting. After a while, Lauren continued. "Everyone wants something from you. A decision, an approval, a favor. Eventually you stop knowing who actually cares." Daniel remained silent for another moment. Then he spoke. "The people who care usually ask for the least." Lauren looked at him. Such a simple sentence. Yet it landed with surprising force. The room became quiet again. Not empty, not uncomfortable, just quiet. The kind of silence that exists when two people stop performing for the world. Lauren found herself studying his face. The lines earned through responsibility. The calm confidence. The absence of bitterness despite everything he had endured. Daniel noticed her looking and raised an eyebrow. "What?" Lauren smiled and shook her head. "Nothing." But it was not nothing. For the first time in years, she had spent an hour talking to someone who never tried to impress her. And as the rain continued falling beyond the windows, Lauren realized that was exactly why she could not stop thinking about him. The following Monday began with whispers. Lauren noticed them the moment she stepped into headquarters. Conversations stopped when she passed. Employees exchanged curious glances. A few executives seemed unusually interested in her schedule. Rumors traveled quickly inside large companies, and lately one particular rumor had begun spreading faster than the rest. People had noticed she spent time talking with Daniel Hayes. Most dismissed it as coincidence. Others turned it into entertainment. By lunchtime, the story had evolved into something completely different. Lauren ignored it. At least she tried to. That afternoon, she was reviewing tenant development proposals when a knock sounded at her office door. "Come in." Her assistant entered carrying a file. "You asked for the background information." Lauren nodded. The moment the door closed behind her assistant, she opened the folder. Inside were employee records, performance reviews, professional certifications. Then she found the section she had been searching for. Family information. Her eyes moved slowly across the page. Divorced. Sole custodial parent. One dependent child. Lauren sat back in her chair. For several moments, she simply stared out the window. The skyline stretched toward the horizon beneath a pale autumn sky. She thought about Emma waiting patiently in the car. She thought about Daniel preparing lunches, helping with homework, working long hours, and somehow remaining kind despite carrying responsibilities that would overwhelm most people. Then she noticed another document attached to the file. Court records. Not scandal. Not conflict. Just facts. Quiet facts that told a very different story from the gossip circulating throughout the building. Daniel had not abandoned his family. He had not failed his daughter. Years earlier, when his marriage ended, he had taken on nearly every responsibility without complaint. He worked additional shifts, rearranged his entire life, sacrificed promotions that required travel. Every decision pointed toward one goal, giving Emma stability. Lauren slowly closed the folder. The silence inside her office felt heavy. Not because she had discovered something shocking, because she had discovered something admirable. Later that evening, another executive gathering filled the top-floor reception lounge. Investors mingled with department heads. Waiters moved through the room, carrying trays of appetizers. The atmosphere appeared elegant. Beneath the surface, it felt exhausting. Brandon Pierce stood near the center of the crowd, entertaining a group of executives. Lauren arrived just in time to hear part of the conversation. Some people never move forward, Brandon said with a smirk. They spend years stuck in the same place because they are afraid to take risks. A few people laughed. Then someone mentioned Daniel's name. Brandon shrugged. Look around. There is a reason some people run companies, and some people repair air conditioners. More laughter followed. Lauren felt her jaw tighten. Not because the comment was cruel, because it was ignorant. Brandon saw titles. She had started seeing character. Across the room, Daniel entered carrying a maintenance report someone had requested earlier. He handed it to an operations manager and prepared to leave. He had clearly heard the comment. Yet he showed no reaction whatsoever. No anger. No embarrassment. No need to defend himself. Lauren watched him disappear through the doorway. The room continued buzzing with conversation. But something inside her shifted. The rumors no longer mattered. The opinions no longer mattered. For the first time, she understood the truth hidden behind years of assumptions. Everyone kept looking at Daniel Hayes and seeing a divorced man. Lauren had finally started seeing the man himself, and what she saw made it impossible to look away. Over the next several weeks, Lauren discovered something deeply inconvenient. No matter how busy she became, Daniel Hayes kept finding his way into her thoughts. It happened during investor meetings. It happened while reviewing contracts. It happened late at night when the city lights glowed beyond her office windows, and the entire building seemed to exhale after another exhausting day. She would be halfway through an important presentation and suddenly remember the way Daniel listened when someone spoke. She would hear executives arguing over strategy and remember how he solved problems without needing recognition. The realization frustrated her. Lauren had spent years building discipline into every corner of her life. Emotions were supposed to follow logic, yet nothing about this felt logical. One Wednesday afternoon, she found herself standing outside a conference room where Daniel was inspecting a ventilation issue. He did not notice her at first. A young employee was apologizing repeatedly for submitting an incorrect maintenance request. I should have checked everything before sending it, the employee said nervously. Daniel shook his head. Everybody makes mistakes. Even you, the employee asked. A faint smile appeared on his face. Especially me. The employee laughed. The tension disappeared instantly. Lauren watched the exchange from the doorway. Once again, Daniel accomplished something remarkable without trying. He made people feel safe. Later that evening, Lauren was preparing to leave when she noticed rain falling outside. The parking lot shimmered beneath rows of lights. As she entered the lobby, she saw Daniel sitting on a bench near the entrance. Beside him sat Emma, focused on a school notebook. Big test tomorrow? Lauren asked as she approached. Emma looked up and smiled. Science exam. She has been studying all week, Daniel said. Dad has been quizzing me every night. Lauren sat beside them. What began as a brief conversation somehow stretched into nearly 30 minutes. Emma enthusiastically explained her science project. Daniel occasionally added details. Lauren found herself laughing more than she had in days. At one point, Emma excused herself to grab a book from the car. The moment she disappeared through the revolving doors, silence settled between Lauren and Daniel. Not awkward silence. Comfortable silence. The kind she rarely experienced with anyone. "You look tired," Daniel said. Lauren smiled. "That seems to be your favorite observation." "Because it is usually true." She looked out toward the rain. "Some days I think the company owns more of my life than I do." Daniel considered her words. "Then maybe you should keep the parts that matter most." Lauren turned toward him. "And what parts are those?" Daniel glanced toward the parking lot where Emma was running back through the rain holding her book above her head. His expression softened immediately. "The people waiting for you when the work is finished." Lauren followed his gaze. Something stirred quietly inside her chest. It was not admiration anymore. It had grown into something deeper, something she could no longer dismiss as curiosity. As Emma returned laughing and slightly out of breath, Lauren realized the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. She was no longer interested in understanding Daniel Hayes. Somewhere along the way, she had started caring about him, and that realization frightened her far more than any boardroom ever could. The annual Leadership Summit was one of the most important events on Mitchell Properties' calendar. Executives, investors, partners, and department managers gathered from across the country to discuss the company's future. The ballroom of a downtown hotel glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Conversations filled the room. Expensive suits moved between tables. Confidence seemed to flow as freely as the coffee. Daniel had no reason to be there. At least that was what several people believed. He had only been invited because facilities management was being recognized for maintaining record operational performance across the company's properties. Even then, his role was supposed to be simple. Attend the event. Accept a certificate. Leave quietly. Brandon Pierce had different plans. From the moment he entered the ballroom, he noticed the way Lauren's attention occasionally drifted toward Daniel. It irritated him more than he cared to admit. Brandon had spent years building influence within the company. He understood power. He understood ambition. What he did not understand was why a woman like Lauren seemed increasingly interested in a divorced maintenance manager. As dinner concluded, the evening program began. One executive after another walked across the stage. Applause echoed through the ballroom. Financial achievements were celebrated. Expansion plans were praised. Then facilities management was called forward. Daniel rose from his seat. The applause was polite, but noticeably weaker than before. Brandon smiled to himself. When Daniel reached the stage, the host handed him a plaque. Before Daniel could return to his table, Brandon unexpectedly stepped toward a microphone. "Before we continue," Brandon said, "I think it is important to recognize perseverance." Several guests looked confused. Brandon continued smiling. "After all, not everyone here has enjoyed the same level of success in life." A few uncomfortable laughs drifted through the room. Daniel remained still. Brandon glanced toward him. Some people build companies. Some people simply maintain them. More laughter followed. Not everyone joined in. Many looked away. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lauren felt anger rise immediately. Brandon was not joking. He was humiliating someone who had done nothing to deserve it. Daniel could have responded. He could have defended himself. He could have reminded everyone that he had solved problems executives could not solve. Instead, he simply thanked the host for the recognition and stepped off the stage. No speech. No argument. No bitterness. The silence he left behind somehow spoke louder than any response. Later that evening, Lauren found Daniel standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city. Cool autumn air drifted through the darkness. Traffic lights sparkled far below. "You should not have had to listen to that," she said. Daniel leaned against the railing. "People usually reveal more about themselves than they do about you." Lauren shook her head. "That does not make it right." Daniel smiled faintly. "No, but carrying anger never fixes anything." Lauren stared at him in disbelief. Most people would have spent the entire night complaining. Daniel seemed more concerned about everyone else's comfort than his own pride. Inside the ballroom, music continued playing. Laughter drifted through the glass doors. But standing beneath the night sky, Lauren realized something with absolute certainty. Brandon saw Daniel as a failure because he measured success with titles and status. She had started measuring it differently. And by that standard, Daniel Hayes was one of the strongest men she had ever known. 3 weeks after the Leadership Summit, Mitchell Properties faced the most serious challenge in its history. A major acquisition that had been celebrated for months suddenly began unraveling. Investors demanded explanations. Financial projections no longer aligned with internal reports. Several key partners delayed commitments until questions were answered. The atmosphere inside headquarters changed overnight. Hallways that once buzzed with confidence now carried tension. Emergency meetings filled every conference room. Lauren barely slept. Brandon Pierce positioned himself at the center of every discussion, offering solutions, recommendations, and carefully prepared explanations. On the surface, he appeared helpful. Yet something felt wrong. The numbers never quite matched. The explanations always seemed slightly too convenient. One rainy Tuesday morning, Lauren sat in a board meeting surrounded by executives and advisors. Charts covered the screens. Forecasts filled the tables. Everyone talked at once. Then a quiet voice interrupted from the back of the room. "May I ask a question?" Heads turned. Daniel stood near the doorway holding a maintenance report. He had only entered because of building systems. Update was scheduled after the meeting. Brandon immediately frowned. "This discussion involves corporate strategy." Daniel nodded. "I understand." He glanced toward one of the charts displayed on the screen. "I was just wondering why those occupancy projections do not match the actual building usage reports." The room became slightly quieter. Brandon folded his arms. "Because they measure different metrics." Daniel looked at the numbers again. "Then why are they using identical source data?" Several executives exchanged glances. Lauren sat forward. "What do you mean?" Daniel approached the screen. His voice remained calm, respectful, unemotional. "These reports use facility access records." He pointed toward a column of figures. "The occupancy estimates should be lower, much lower." One financial analyst quickly reviewed the data. Then another. The confidence slowly disappeared from their faces. "He is right," one finally said. Brandon immediately stepped in. "There is probably a reporting error." Daniel shook his head gently. "Not one error." He pointed toward additional reports. "Several." The room grew even quieter. For the next 20 minutes, analysts reviewed documents that nobody had questioned before. One discrepancy led to another. Then another. Patterns emerged. Assumptions collapsed. Numbers that had supported months of planning suddenly looked unreliable. Lauren watched the process unfold in real time. No accusations. No speeches. Just facts. Quiet facts. The kind Daniel always trusted. Finally, the chief financial officer lowered his glasses and stared across the table. "These projections should never have been approved." Nobody spoke. Brandon attempted to respond, but the confidence in his voice had vanished. Lauren looked around the room. The executives who once laughed at Daniel now watched him with genuine respect. The consultants stopped taking notes. The advisors stopped checking their phones. Even the board members remained perfectly still. The room had reached that rare moment when truth arrived and every distraction disappeared. Daniel stepped back from the screen. He did not celebrate. He did not seek recognition. He simply returned the marker to the table. For several long seconds, nobody said a word. Then Lauren looked directly at him. In a room filled with titles, influence, and ambition, the quietest man had become the one everyone trusted most. And as silence settled over the boardroom, every person present finally saw what she had seen all along. 6 months later, winter arrived in the city with clear skies and cold mornings. Mitchell Properties had recovered completely. The acquisition crisis became a case study in leadership seminars. Investors regained confidence. Employees felt secure again. Even the culture inside headquarters had changed. People still respected titles, but they had learned to value something else as well. Character. Daniel Hayes never asked for recognition after the boardroom incident. He continued arriving before sunrise. He still walked the buildings with a maintenance tablet under one arm and a cup of coffee in the other. He still greeted receptionists, security guards, and cleaning crews by name. The difference was that now everyone greeted him back. Respect had quietly replaced ridicule. On a snowy Saturday afternoon, Daniel sat in the front row of Emma's school science fair. Parents filled the gymnasium. Folding chairs lined the walls. Student projects covered dozens of tables. Emma stood proudly beside her display explaining renewable energy concepts to judges and visitors. Daniel listened with the same attention he gave every story she told. To him, nothing in the world mattered more. A few minutes later, a familiar voice spoke behind him. I think she got her confidence from you. Daniel turned and smiled. Lauren stood there wearing a cream-colored winter coat, snowflakes resting lightly in her chestnut hair. Emma's face immediately lit up. Lauren! She hurried over and wrapped her arms around her. Lauren laughed and hugged her back. Watching them together felt strangely natural now, as if they had always belonged in the same story. After the science fair ended, the three of them walked through a nearby park dusted with fresh snow. Children played in the distance. Bare tree branches stretched across a pale blue sky. The city felt quieter than usual. Peaceful. Emma eventually ran ahead toward a group of friends from school, leaving Daniel and Lauren alone on the walking path. For a moment, neither spoke. Their breath drifted into the cold air. Footsteps crunched softly across the snow beneath them. Do you remember the cafeteria? Lauren finally asked. Daniel laughed. Unfortunately, everyone thought they knew who you were. Daniel shrugged. Most people only see the part of the story standing in front of them. Lauren stopped walking. Daniel looked at her. There was something different in her expression. Not uncertainty, not hesitation, just honesty. They saw a divorced man, she said quietly. They saw someone they thought had failed. Daniel remained silent. Lauren stepped closer. I saw a father who never quit on his daughter. Her voice softened. I saw a man who treated people with respect when nobody was watching. I saw someone stronger than every executive who ever laughed at him. The winter breeze moved gently through the trees. Daniel looked away for a second, overwhelmed by the sincerity in her words. When he finally met her eyes again, he found no judgment there. No expectations. Only understanding. The kind he had not experienced in a very long time. Ahead of them, Emma waved excitedly from across the park. Lauren smiled. Daniel smiled back. Around them, the world continued moving as it always had. Cars passed. Snow fell softly from branches. Distant laughter drifted through the afternoon air. But for one quiet moment, none of it mattered. Because the woman who had once been separated from him by status, wealth, and circumstance had finally seen the truth hidden beneath the silence. And in that peaceful winter stillness, Daniel realized he was no longer walking through life alone.